Okay, plane. Stanley No. 4. Early 1900s. Ready to assemble. Okay, as you can see here, I have a few options. What do I got? Silber glint. Or silber glint. German, anyway. What this is, put it on cast iron tabletops, table saw, bandsaw, what have you. It's dry. It doesn't block. It's supposed to make a very abrasion resistant gliding film, invisible and dry. So we could put that on the body of the plane on the outside, help it glide over the wood. Or, more simply, just some candle wax. Keep it from rusting. Could use 3-in-1 oil. I've used that in the past. I've got some carnauba polish to polish the wood. I have Davy Shine to polish the metal. Orange oil to treat the wood handles. And again, as I said, candle wax. So what am I going to do? Good question. We're not going to do the outside of the plane until after it dries. I don't want to use oil on the outside of the plane because that could get on the project. I think I'm going to try this. I've put it on a couple planes so far. It doesn't seem to leave a film. It does become dry, invisible, and you don't feel like it's there. It doesn't leave anything on the wood. This I'm definitely going to put on the wood after I treat it one more time with some orange oil for cleaning and absorption. I have also used boiled linseed oil or straight linseed oil in the past as well on wood. Davy Shine, instead of using this 3-in-1 on these parts that could rust, I think I will put some 3-in-1 on the parts that are not going to touch the project, so the upper bit of the plane blade and the chip breaker and this and the frog. I'm going to definitely use some Davy polish on the brass. A bit of oil here and here. A bit of oil inside the plane, but keep it pretty dry so that it doesn't collect dust. And on the outside of the plane, once it's finished, I'm going to use this Silver Glide is what the translation is. Okay, so as you can see, you can adjust the frog forward and back, and we'll talk about how I'm going to adjust it later, but right now I'm just going to set it in place and tighten the screws. So it's worth talking quickly about setting the blade in, which obviously goes bevel down, and the chip breaker, which goes as close as possible to the blade. We want to put these two together here, slide it over, and then move it down to about a hair from the blade after they're connected. Obviously being very careful to protect the edge of the blade that we just spent that time sharpening. Okay, so the plane's together. This is not adjusted. So what I'm going to do is remove the cap iron, which is a bit tight, remove the blade, and set the frog. I'm going to set the blade back in, and then just turn it over. What I want to do, setting the frog and the blade, is to have the smallest possible opening, but obviously I need the blade out to do that as well. So with my finger, we'll just wind the blade out slightly, being careful because it's not set, and I could wind the blade into the body. Here we go, blade's coming out. Turn it over. The blade is all right. Basically, I'm going to set the frog just forward of the body opening, or the mouth. So you can see I can move the frog all the way back in line. I'm going to put it just slightly forward of in line, tighten it down, and give that a test. Try to keep the frog square to the body, but it's not 100% necessary because we can adjust it. Once we get the blade in, we can adjust the blade left and right. Okay, I'll pop the blade in, wind it back out slightly. Holding it in place, I'm going to turn it over and check. So, I may have put the frog too far forward. Let's wind the blade out. The mouth is pretty much closed. The blade's not quite out. So, okay. Perhaps I should do what Stanley designed it to do and put the frog exactly in line with the angle on the mouth. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. Basically lining him up. My frog's not 100% square. So it's best as possible by eye. And again, trick is test it with the blade, obviously. So put the blade in, turn it over. Blade doesn't protrude. I wind the blade out. The blade is just protruding. And it's a very small opening. So I may actually adjust the mouth or the frog just slightly back to open the mouth up a tiny bit, because I feel for me that's just a bit too small. That's about the size of a shaving I'd like to take. However, I'd like to have sort of a shaving and a half to 2 shavings width So we'll pull the frog just slightly back. Some planes you can adjust the frog without taking the blade off. This one you can't. Okay, that may be in the exact same spot, but in my mind I've moved the frog back slightly. Going to carefully insert the blade. Sorry about the camera movement. So the blade just protrudes. I like that is just slightly larger than the shaving I expect to take in the mouth, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, before I drop the blade back in, I'm going to wind the blade out slightly. Pop the blade in, make sure it catches, and I'm going to wind it back out a little bit more. Make sure the blade is not in the mouth. Yep. If I can find where I put it, I will put the cap back on. You want the cap to have a solid click. Alright, so I'm happy with that. What I'm not happy with is some of this grime that I see. And I'll probably be wiping off the plane for a couple weeks as I use it. Alright, leather cap's in place. Plane blade is not protruding. I'm going to loosen the cap. I'm going to push the blade so that it protrudes just slightly, just to check. Okay, so a number of things for setup. We know we can adjust the blade left and right. And this blade is showing more on your right than the left. So if we adjust it so that it's about even, be very careful if you run your fingers on it, especially after sharpening. So that's good. I'm going to back the blade out slightly. Blade is just protruding. You can do that by finger or you can do it by eye. You're going to have to adjust the lever again. The blade has just disappeared, but I don't trust myself. I'm going to back it out slightly more. Okay, beautiful. And we'll snap down the lever cap because we're ready to move on to the finishing steps to make this plane a solid working plane. Okay, as I showed you before, 220 grit paper. The blade is backed out, so I'm not going to nick the blade. What I'm going to do is a bit of surface rust, a bit of pitting. I want this as flat as possible. Although I want the front edge slightly raised so it doesn't knock into things. It rides over them to allow the plane blade to get it. So what I'm doing is I just put the plane flat. It's in tension as if it would be used, but the blade is backed out so that we don't damage the blade. And on the flattest known surface we have, we're just going to sand back and forth. Okay, so you can take a look and see high spots and low spots and basically go until you're happy. So yes, I'm going to use this as a smoothing plane. Am I going to make it perfectly true and flat and no pitting? Probably not, mostly because I'm going to run out of sandpaper before I do. But key steps, do it till you're happy. After that, couple little strokes across the front to raise the edge. You want to do the sides as well. That is important, especially if you're going to use a shooting board. Again, go to your happy. When you are happy, what I would suggest doing, so you don't have a sharp 90-degree edge, is to lift the plane up and sand round over the edges at the bottom. Again, can do it on the tail, but I would suggest doing the nose. Just a couple strokes so that it's not sharp. Okay, so after that, what I would do is the same thing on 600 grit paper. And that'll polish it, make it nice and smooth and shiny, although the 220 doesn't do a bad job. And that is basically it, other than treating the plane itself. And as I said, I'm going to put a bit of oil on all of these metal bits that aren't touching the wood. I'm going to use the silver glide on the sides and the bottom. And in use, I'll probably just rub some candle wax from a cheap candle on the sides. So I'll get on with a bit of sanding, and I'll get back to you when I've got something better to show you than this here. Okay, so I switched to 600 grit paper. I'm not going to finish this plane perfectly today. I just wanted to show you. So as you see, it's fairly shiny. You can still see some pitting. Same with the sides. You can see along here where it's lower, along here where it's taken it off to square it up. And that side's more apparent, but it's truer. So I will finish this plane off one day perfectly, but for what I'm using it for right now, it doesn't matter. This is good. What I'm going to do is put some silver glide on it, get some wood, and let's advance the blade and see how we've done restoring this plane. Okay, we'll get a bit of this silver glide. I use this purple cloth so I don't mix it up with anything else. Definitely don't need a cloth that big. All right, we'll just go with it. Tiny bit is all you need. So, start on the bottom. Make sure the blade's not advanced. Don't need to slice the end of your finger off if you've done a good job sharpening. So this should inhibit rust as well. I've used it on a block plane. Doesn't leave any residue. It's invisible, although it does make the blade look a bit shiny. And it's definitely slippery. A little bit is all you need. It's taking off a bunch of grime as well. Let's give it a quick buff. Make sure it's dry. Okay, and that should be it. I'm going to advance the blade. I'll get some lumber and see how we've done. Okay, so first thing, I've got a piece of ply cut off. I'm going to try to do across the top here first. Just see how this plane goes. Advance the blade. Okay, the blade is just out. I like to sight down the blade to check the depth and adjust that it's the same protrusion all the way across. We'll lock the lever cap down. Okay, so not quite out. We'll adjust the blade slightly forward. No, a little bit more. I think I'm just getting it. This might be out just a bit far. Yeah. Back it off slightly. So we are getting some nice, fairly thin shavings. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. And just as a comparison, I'm going to grab the block plane. Okay, here's a block plane. Still got a little bit of surface rust, and it's a lot smoother. This one has an adjustable mouth as well. Anyway, so I've cleaned that up. Used it also on some plywood. Yeah, so I'm liking that. Beautiful. All right, so that's on plywood. Bit harder to plane, so it's pretty smooth. I'm liking that. Very smooth. Good job. Now what I have here is, I think it's some treated pine. It's from an old pallet. I also have a piece of hardwood we can try too. Let's try this block plane on here. Okay. That shaving might be, it's not as thick as paper. Could be a bit thinner. That works great. I can tell you in high school wood class, I couldn't plane this well, and I haven't done any for a long time. So yeah, liking that. Let's try the number 4. Oh yeah, bit thinner. Dropping some shavings on the floor, but basically I'm pretty happy with that. I got one more thing we can try, because this might not be pine, it might be a hardwood, but I definitely have some hardwood, some Tassie oak, which is a type of ash here in Australia. Okay, we'll throw this in and just take a few strokes with each off of it. This is actually the stick I use for mounting the rudder, which I need to keep because the rudder has not been mounted to Talitha yet. Okay, block plane, obviously great for end grain, and the block plane worked much better on plywood. I used it to fix the doors of my bench grinder build. Okay, block plane may be set just a bit deep for this. There we go. Yeah, that's nice. Those shavings are a bit thick. I may readjust that block plane. Let's try the number 4. Look, it's taking a bit. Obviously the number 4 is much wider. It's very smooth, and it's cutting pretty good. So again, I'm happy. So that's it. Number 4 block plane. Here, it's a little pocket plane. And I've completed the compass plane, but I won't show you, but I will complete the other ones. You'll see me use them when we get back to Talitha and start doing some more projects for the boat. So thanks for tuning in, and upcoming, I'm going to be looking at setting up some more tools. I'm going to go through some dovetailing with a jig, and I might try it by hand, although I've never done it by hand before. We'll see how we go. And there's definitely some boat projects in the works before we get back to Talitha. So thanks for tuning in.